Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video will be my August wrap up. I read a total of 7 books in August, which isn't bad. I mean, it could have been worse. I feel like 7 is my regular now, but I did read all physical books, which I'm very, very happy about. And I had one reread for the month. I did find a new favorite book, which I'm very happy about. So I'm just gonna jump straight into the wrap up. The first book I read was Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. This I gave 2 out of 5 stars. I think I initially had given this a 3-star, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to rate it a little bit lower. I feel like, if I'm honest, it's more of a 2.5. This follows our female character who gets the opportunity to interview this male actor who's about to be the next James Bond, and this interview takes her on this whirlwind weekend, and both characters form this intense connection and bond, but they end up going their separate ways. And 10 years later, they are both divorcees and they reunite for another interview that makes them question everything. This was decent. It was a pretty engaging novel, but I did feel kind of bored the first 200 pages. I found the timeline a little confusing. I didn't really feel the chemistry between the two characters. Honestly, feel like all they cared about was their careers and their reputations. I understand why the female character felt the need to always prove herself and to work hard for her career, because a lot of people just assumed that she had slept with him and that's like the only reason why the interview became super successful. But that part just felt so repetitive that she always felt like she had to prove herself. It was like, I get it. I just feel like they didn't really have a deep connection. I didn't really understand why they were so in love with each other. The whole book was just a very small misunderstanding that turned into something really big that could have just been solved with one simple conversation. The writing was nice and easy and engaging. Like, I did want to keep reading. I did want to find out what happened in the past and what is happening in the present, but it just lacked with the characters and the romance for me. Then I read my new favorite book, which is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This I obviously gave 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. I'm torn between telling you guys what this book is about versus not saying anything at all, because I went into this book knowing nothing about it. I just thought it had to do with books, and that was it that I knew. I mean, if you don't want to know what this book is about, obviously you can skip ahead a little bit, but this follows Florence, who is a ghostwriter. She writes for a very famous romance author, and after a bad breakup, Florence no longer believes in love. She no longer wants to write about it, but she gets a new editor, Ben, who reminds her that it's in her contract to continue writing about romance. So Florence has to continue writing this last book. And after getting a devastating phone call, Florence runs home to be with her family. Ben ends up showing up at Florence's family's home and their funeral home that they run, but Ben is not alive. He is a ghost. Why is it every time that I talk about my favorite books, I cannot explain them? I feel like that was such a poor explanation of this book, but this book was so beautiful. I literally cried the entire time I read this book. Like, I was sobbing, and it was to the point where it was like a heavy, heavy cry. I will say this book is actually very, very heavy. It deals with grief and losing loved ones. I feel like the romance isn't the main focus of this book, especially in the beginning. I feel like the romance kind of comes more towards maybe like 50 to 100 pages in. It was such a beautiful, heartbreaking, magical, and heartwarming book. Like I said, Florence's family runs a funeral home, so they are constantly surrounded by death, and I loved the way that Florence and her family deal with death and their relationship with death. It was just so beautiful. They had such a unique and understanding of life and death. I loved all the funeral home aspects in here. It was so interesting, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Addams Family meets Ghost Whisperer meets Witches of East End, but like the cozy vibes of Witches of East End, if that makes sense. And like their house, it kind of reminded me of the funeral home for some reason. I loved the whole vibe of this book. It also is kind of like small town, fall, autumn vibes, cozy vibes. It was a perfect mixture of contemporary and paranormal. I loved the characters. I loved Florence. I thought she was such a fantastic female character. I loved how she had such an interesting bond with each of her family members. I also loved Ben. He was such a sweet, kind, but also very like mysterious and kind of, I don't want to say dominating, but I got like, you know, businessman vibes from him. It was definitely like friends to lovers, slow burn, opposites attract. This book did a really good job with the relationship between Ben and Florence and just their entire development. I felt like Ben and Florence were meant to be together. There were so many things from their past that connected them, and it just made sense that they were meant to be together. It felt like each word and each sentence and each paragraph was meant to be in this book. It felt like a warm hug on a cool fall day. It made me look at life and death differently. I feel like as I get older and the more people I lose in my life, I definitely have a different relationship with death. And this book, I feel like kind of explained that more for me, and it gave me a new perspective on death. It made me homesick for some reason. It made me think of my childhood and being a kid. It made me crave my dreams of an old Victorian house in the middle of nowhere with a warm and cozy feeling. It made me want to listen to the wind to hear the dead sing. There's this moment in this book where Florence is talking to her dad, and they talk about the wind, and he says it's the dead singing. I don't know, there's just something so beautiful about that. I loved what this book did with, you know, obviously the conversations about life and death, but also grief, and how sometimes it doesn't hit you until a lot later, and how it's always a constant thing, especially if you lost somebody very close to you. Even though I wish there was a little bit more romance in here, I feel like the amount of romance we got in this book was perfect for the book. I just love Florence and her family and Ben. I have some tabs in here, but I really want to reread it and actually like properly tab everything, because I feel like there are so many things I wish I would have tabbed. Also, Fairy Loot has a very special edition of this book coming out in December, and I am so desperate for it. Like, I need to make sure I buy it. I'm gonna be so sad if I don't end up grabbing a copy, but this book just had everything, and I highly, highly recommend reading it. I loved this book so much. It is my favorite book of the year. And then I read Cold Hearted Rake by Lisa Kleypas. This is the first book in the Ravenel series, and this I gave 3 out of 5 stars. I feel like I'm horrible at explaining historical romances, so I'm just going to read the summary I put in my journal. Devin Ravenel, a charming rake, ends up inheriting an earldom that he doesn't want. With his new estate comes the late Earl's 3 younger sisters and his young, beautiful widow, Kathleen, who is stubborn and determined, which challenges Devin. I liked this. I think it was a great introduction to the series. However, I wish this focused more on Devin and Kathleen. There was kind of another subplot that was going on, which I liked, but I feel like it kind of took away from the main couple. I loved the family. It was so nice to get to know all of them and have an introduction to the family. I really liked Kathleen as a female character. I thought she was great. Devin had to kind of grow on me. I feel like when he realized he wanted Kathleen and he didn't want her as just a mistress, then I was vibing with him. I was like, okay, he's redeeming himself for me. I like him better now. Kathleen changed Devin to become a better person, which I loved. He slowly changed for her without kind of realizing, and he became kind of a family man, which I loved. There were some boring moments in this book where some stuff kind of dragged. Overall, it was a really solid read and a great start to the series. Then I read Marion Winterbourne by Lisa Kleypas. This is the second book in the Ravenel series, and this I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Reese Winterbourne, a successful, self-made man, is an expert in getting what he wants, and from the moment he meets the shy aristocrats Lady Helen, he is determined to possess her. If he must take her virtue to ensure she marries him, so much the better. This was almost a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved this. I tabbed so much of it. I dog-eared a lot of pages as well. This is probably like my second favorite historical romance of all time. I just loved it. This book was so romantic and hot and sweet. I loved Rhys and Helen together. They were complete opposites, but I feel like they worked so well together. I loved how obsessed Rhys was with Helen. He wanted her all the time. He wanted her to marry him immediately. He was so desperate for her, but he was also super gentle and calm with her. I just loved their journey as a couple, and I loved reading about them falling in love. Again, I also loved seeing the whole family and seeing Devon and Kathleen married and in love and happy. I loved that. I also loved the ending of this book. It was just so sweet and cute, and I don't know, I loved everything about this book. It was just fantastic. Again, there were some moments that kind of dragged and some moments that were a little boring, but overall, I loved this book. It is definitely my favorite in the series so far, and definitely a new favorite historical romance. Then I read Devil in Spring by Lisa Kleypas. This is the third book in the Ravenel series. This I gave 3 out of 5 stars. Lady Pandora, an eccentric wallflower, has no interest in being a wife. She'd rather spend her days planning out her new board game business. But one night at a ball, she accidentally gets herself caught into a scandal with a clinical rake. This I liked, but I did find it kind of boring, and I really expected to love this because this is about Evie and Sebastian's son, Gabriel. Evie and Sebastian is from Lisa Kleypas's other series, the Wallflower series. The book is Devil in Winter, and I loved that book. Like, that one is a close tie to Marion Winterborn for me. I loved that other book. So I was hoping to really love this because it's about their son, and we got to see a little bit of Evie and Sebastian in here, which I loved. But unfortunately, I didn't love Gabriel as much as I loved his dad. I liked Pandora, but I personally didn't really care for the like feminist plots. Like, I get it. She wants to kind of be independent and do her own thing and run her own business. And I think that's amazing. But I personally just don't really care for that, especially in historical romance. Like, I know it's kind of a movement, but I find it kind of boring. I didn't really feel their chemistry. I definitely felt like they were more friends than anything. I feel like Pandora was just kind of with him because he promised that she would get her business and she would be able to make her own money. Later on, I feel like Gabriel was more into her, and I could see that he actually deeply cared for her, but I feel like it was kind of one-sided at some moments. And like I said, it was awesome to see Gabriel and his family and his parents and his siblings, and then also the Ravenel family. I loved seeing all of them. It was a fun and cute read. I just didn't love the characters. And then I reread After Ever Happy by Anna Todd. This is the 4th book in the After series. This I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This is actually the 3rd time I have read this book, and I have given it 5 stars every time. I genuinely love this book. Obviously, this continues Tessa and Hardin's story as more family secrets get exposed and they kind of deal with the aftermath. Obviously, I reread this because the movie was coming out. If you want to know my thoughts on the movie, I will link my review down below. The first half of that video is spoiler free. I feel like this book definitely shows right person, wrong time. It's so beautiful to see Tessa and Hardin both work on themselves. If you were to ask me what my favorite thing about the After series is, it's their development as characters and how much they grow. It would be easy for them to continue the cycle that they were on, but they both decide to break that cycle and that they want to be better people for themselves, but for each other. And I just love that about this series. I love that about this book. You can just really see how much that they've grown. You know, Tessa and Hardin have such a toxic, exhausting relationship, but I feel like all of that was worth it for this book. The ending was worth all of that. I am excited to see what happens next. Not that there's another book, but there's another movie. So I'm excited to see what they take from the rest of this book and I guess to see what else they include. I don't really know, but I'm very glad I reread this. Then I read Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills. This I gave 3 out of 5 stars. This I technically haven't hauled yet, actually. I ended up buying this in August and I immediately started reading it. This is a YA contemporary that follows Claudia as she overhears a breakup of her school's most popular it couple, and she ends up getting caught by both of them, which kind of gets her in hot water with one of the girls. But they get thrown together to participate in a class production of A Midsummer's Night Dream, where Claudia ends up meeting a very cute and goofy boy. This was a very cute YA contemporary. I read it because I had heard some really good things about it and people were kind of talking about it on book Twitter. As you guys know, I love Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, and I have been craving some really good YA rom-coms. This unfortunately did not compare to Better Than the Movies. I just assumed the cute little romance would be a little bit more of the main focus, but unfortunately it wasn't. That's where book Twitter failed me on that, but that's okay. This book is definitely more about friendships and about accepting and loving people for who they are, which I think is a beautiful message, especially for a YA book where this is targeted towards a younger audience. It was still a really cute and fun read. I just had really high expectations. So those were all 7 books that I read in August. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you think about them. Also, let me know how many books you read in August and which one was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.